Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I'm your host, Maryann Petri, and there's a non-denominational retreat weekend at the Resolution Center of Jacksonville, Florida. This will be a time of support and renewal for parents and grandparents on the journey of parental alienation. It's called Standing Strong in Resilience, Paving the Way for Good Health and a Great Future. This will take place on April 22nd through the 24th at the Resolution Center. I will have everything in the podcast notes. Right now, I would like to welcome Attorney Sean Kuhlmeyer. He is a dad who hasn't seen his son in 2.5 years because his ex-wife and her unethical lawyer used false allegations of abuse to railroad him out of their son's life. And he is an attorney. Now he teaches people how to file bar complaints against unethical lawyers. People are dying because family courts are causing violence. Parents are killing themselves on the court's house steps because they have been railroaded out of their children's lives. Parents are gunning each other down at custody exchanges. Children are committing suicide because a parent has been ripped out of their life. Their deaths are only the most extreme of the problem. The unseen aspect is the trauma created by unethical attorneys manipulating the family courts to force parents into a parental gladiatorial blood sport that makes the divorce attorneys rich, but destroys the families and children they are supposed to be helping. And I totally welcome you, Attorney Sean Kuhlmeyer. How are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing all right. Every day above ground is a good day. And it's another beautiful sunny day in Seattle.
Well, it's not over here. I was telling you earlier we were having an ice storm, so I hope the power holds out.
Yeah. I hear that it's a big one back east.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. And I'm so glad to have you on the show. And, how did you get sucked into family court, the family law insanity?
Um, well, the short answer is that in 2016, my ex-wife and we were together for just under 20 years. We broke up. She had developed some pretty serious issues that she wasn't addressing. And we needed, a break, and I was hopeful that she would address those issues. Some of those issues are leftover trauma that she suffered from childhood, and she just didn't. And so we started sharing custody of our son at the time, and we were aimed at having a soft landing divorce, an amicable divorce. She made the mistake of walking into a local Seattle law firm that advertises itself as a cooperative divorce firm. But in reality, they're actually one of Seattle's most notorious high conflict divorce firms. And they're famous for taking parents that need to transition their relationship to the next model. And instead of helping those families do that, instead turning the case into a high conflict nightmare moneymaker for the firm that drains literally every penny out of the family, destroys the parental relationships, destroys the children's relationship. Children wind up suicidal. I know of 3 parents currently that are victims of this firm where their children are suicidal. And the cases then turn into these nightmares that just drag on for years.
Mhm.
And that's effectively what happened. My ex-wife and we negotiated an agreed final parenting plan that reflected the 50-50 agreement we were already living. And her attorney, who was acting as a conflict finder for the firm's big dog, who was probably the most unethical attorney currently practicing law in Washington state. She has a long history of bar complaints against her. Recently, a judge issued an order saying that she had made untrue statements of fact to the court, and she engages in litigation to harass the opposing party. So I'm making statements of fact now, not opinion. She came in and she just created this nightmare in our family, and escalated it all up. And through this process, I got to learn what happens when you wind up with an incompetent family law judge. What happens when the systemic corruption that exists inside of family law, corruption I call a corruption of collusion. And it's set up to create conflict, and by creating conflict, it generates attorney's fees. Currently, when you add the money that my ex-wife has paid, we're just a normal middle-class family that we were worth about $700,000 going into this. We both had, good jobs. I'm an attorney. So, we had, right in the middle of our life, we were worth about 700 grand. Her attorney has billed her $264,000 to accomplish nothing. It's cost me over $200,000 out of pocket, $300,000 in additional debt generated, $400,000 in lost attorney's fees and damages to my business. Our divorce is currently at about $1.1 million. It's literally cost more than everything we have. My ex-wife has given her unethical attorney all of her retirement, all of the equity in the home. She's barely hanging on to the home. And we're no closer today to having any resolutions than we were then. We have 3 cases in the Court of Appeals currently, one of which is going to make new law about these new abusive litigation laws that are starting to happen across the country, where they're basically shutting down people who stand up for their rights. And we still don't have a solution. So that's my very short story of how I got sucked up into this nightmare.
And it seems like once you get sucked into it, you can't get out. People say, well, just walk away. There's no way you can walk away.
Right. That's an excellent point, right? People have said that to me many times before. There's really 2 or maybe 3 problems with the idea of just walk away. Number one is that you're abandoning your child to what you know to be an emotionally and verbally and abusive situation. I mean, don't get me wrong. My ex-wife, has many wonderful qualities, and I still care very deeply about her. She was a very good person.
Mm-hmm.
But this process is crazy making, and this process, polarizes people. So, whatever private issues that my ex was dealing with have not gotten better. They've only gotten worse. So, walking away, I would literally be abandoning my son to what I know to be an emotionally unhealthy environment. And, not the least of which is because family law has created that emotionally unhealthy environment. And the second problem with it is that when you get one of these unethical, high conflict, bad apple attorneys, there really is no walking away, because they can keep coming after you, and they can keep dragging you through the process, and they can keep making the storyline to be about you. So for instance, in my case, they accuse me of being the abusive litigant. Now, it is true that I'm filing motions and I'm fighting like a cornered rat, right? And yeah, I'm fighting hard. But the reason I'm fighting hard is because I haven't seen my son,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Right.
because the court is not enforcing the orders equally, because she's a woman. I mean, the court is literally treating her better because she's a woman. So, but I'm the one that gets labeled as the abusive litigant, not the person who is denying me access to my child and not obeying the court's orders. So, they can just keep coming after you. And one of the reasons why the lawyers are doing that is because it makes them money.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, the more judgments that they get, the more they can execute against those judgments, and the more money they can get. So, for instance, the firm that my ex-wife is at, I've done an enormous amount of research into this firm, and I'm actually beginning a book to writing a book about this firm, both opposing counsel and her law partner. And when you go and you do a search in the King County Superior Court about judgments they've got judgments against people going back 15, 20 years that they're still collecting on. And that's really what it is that they're about. They're creating a money-making machine by getting court orders that say Joe has to pay X amount of dollars. And if Joe's not paying X amount of dollars, they'll just keep coming after them. I mean, I know they've done some of this stuff to you, right? I mean, I did a little bit of background research about you, like every good trial lawyer would, right? And you lost, you lost your nursing job, right? So now you're unemployed, and you're unemployed because of the false allegations that they made against you, and then they impute your income as if you could go out and magically, in a land of magical thinking, make just as much money at doing who knows what, burger flipping or ditch digging as you did as a registered nurse. And that's what your child support is going to be set at. It's insane. And you literally cannot walk away. Walking away would really mean disappearing, changing your name, moving to a country that, that you could get by in that other country, and literally just disappearing. Well, the problem with that, you can't even do that. If you owe enough money in child support, you can't get a passport. So walking away is just an illusion that one can do, unless they're willing to let you walk away. And that's what some of the goals are, right? Particularly with these personality disordered people. And it's usually, it's usually women, right? We can talk about that in a minute, but so I'm going to say that. So with these personality disordered women, they don't want to have to deal with their ex-husband anymore, with the person that they made a child with. So often their goal actually is to create enough of a nightmare that you just say, I don't want to deal with this anymore, and then I'll walk away, and they'll let you, because that's not what they want. And that's exactly what my ex-wife did. At one point, she literally offered to buy out my parenting rights. She sent me an email saying, if you surrender your parenting rights, and let me quote from it actually, step out and don't be a dad, surrender your parenting rights, and I will forgive the amount that you owe and not ask for any future support, which amounted to about $200,000. So she effectively, tried to buy out my parenting rights, as if I, was going to do that. And I wrote a letter to her attorney and her boss, and I used language that lawyers don't typically use, which is, I literally told him it will be a cold day in hell before I do that. But so yeah, you can't really walk away, as you know.
Right. And what you call that letter child trafficking just sounds kind of like
I would say, I wouldn't say it's child trafficking as much as I would say that it's a form of kidnapping and extortion. Right? Child trafficking, at least as I traditionally understand it, is when you're, taking a child and they're, being put into a different situation for a financial gain. In this case, what really was going on is that my ex-wife was, rightfully so, sick of the nightmare that, we were living through, and she wanted to have some sort of an end to it. But what she refuses to do is to take any responsibility for creating that nightmare, and refuses to take any responsibility for the fact that it's her attorney who is driving it. And so, perhaps someday she'll listen to this, and I hope she will, and because I've been very clear, she could end the conflict, end it completely in about an hour. All she'd have to do is, find the way to communicate with me that she wanted to end it. We'd, enter a few documents, right? And it would be over. And, and I, the conflict between her and me would be over. Now, the conflict between me and her attorney would be different, because I'm going to, of course I'm, hopefully my goal is to recover my damages from her, both my damages and my ex-wife's damages from her, because she's done such egregious things. But my ex-wife could end the conflict in an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And I would press a reset button and reset our relationship to a positive level, because I recognize that while it's partially about my ex-wife's choices, a lot of my ex-wife's choices are the result of the manipulation of her unethical attorney,
Mm-hmm.
or B, they happen inside of the context of the family court system, which is set up to, again, like I said, it creates a gladiatorial blood sport where, parents, have to fight with each other and, go after each other.
Mm-hmm. Well, because I've been called litigious and vexatious, but I had to defend myself against
Mhm.
the child support as my kids were aging out.
Ah,
Because I did get screwed over for a custody trial. That's another story. But my son kept saying, "Mom, if you just act normal, then we can go back to the way things were." I'm thinking, no, I'll be going to prison every 3 months. I've got to stop this charade.
right. That's exactly right. Um, yeah, I call it the dark crossroads. What they do is high conflict divorce forces one of the parent into this place where they really only have a few choices. They've got the choice of violence, either internal, right, aimed at yourself, suicide; external, aimed, outside, aimed at, your ex-spouse or their attorney, right?
Hmm.
You've got the choice of, disappear, some version of disappear, right? So that
Hmm.
you're no longer part of it. Victimhood, you can just acquiesce to just being, a victim and letting them just, beat you up.
Hmm.
Or your fourth choice, and this is the choice that we want people to make, which is to access the judicial system in order to defend themselves and to resolve this conflict through judicial system. I mean, that's what we want people to do. We want people to be able to go into the courthouse and to be able to resolve the problem that exists between them through the process and procedures there. But when they do, now they turn around and they say, "Oh, well, no, you're a vexatious litigant because you're defending yourself in
Hmm.
the courthouse, and so therefore we're going to take away your rights to access the courthouse." Well, now that what they've done is they've taken away the only legitimate response that someone has to this environment. And then, what are you left with? You're left with be a victim, right?
Hmm.
Disappear, or violence. Honestly, I look at the situation, I'm like, it's a miracle that we don't have more violence. I
Hmm.
mean,
Right.
really. I mean, it's a miracle that we don't have more violence.
Hmm.
And it really is a testament to parents' restraint and not wanting to impose the burden that would cause on to their children by engaging in violence. But it's getting worse. I mean, it's just getting worse. I mean, I can rattle off to you the names of half a dozen victims, off the top of my head, of literally parents who killing each other at custody exchanges. In one case, a father shoots himself on the courthouse steps. Another case, a father tracks down a judge and shoots the judge as he gets out of his car, right? A psychologist who kills herself and her children because she's lost a custody issue. And in all of these situations, a common denominator in them is the people have been extremely polarized by the family court system, and what fuels that is the unethical, bad apple divorce attorneys that are just pouring gas constantly onto the fire instead of water, which is what they're supposed to do.
Hmm. Oh, exactly. I remember I was in court, and because I had made multiple complaints on the opposing attorney, I had to. And he said in front of everyone, "Are you going to make another complaint about me today?" And I said, "Well, let's see how you do today."
But
you know, but
it's
it's
yeah, it's great that you bring that up, because I had that exact same situation happen to me last week.
Mm.
literally last week. I was in a hearing that I fought for 6 months to get it on the 28th. Opposing counsel shows up in the hearing and she makes false statements of fact to the court. She tells the court that a court order says something completely different than what the court order actually says.
Mhm.
Literally, she's bald-faced lying to the court. 3 separate lies. And I'm looking at her, I'm like, literally in the hearing, I'm, basically telling her, what she's saying right now is not true. She needs to stop talking because she's literally not speaking the truth.
Mhm.
So I'm going to file another bar complaint against her.
Mhm.
it's
Yeah,
it's
and
crazy.
you have to. I encourage parents to do so, even against judges. And I really ticked off a judge, and I really don't care because he's dead now. And it is just so weird because, and I'll say it, at my son's 16th birthday party, I had him that weekend, and we were singing "Happy Birthday." I wish I had this on video, right? He says in the middle of the song, "I hate my dad's big, fat, ugly attorney, and I'm so glad the judge is dead." And I'm like, first of all, I don't have that on video, and no kid should even know it's morally wrong for a parent to be discussing court with their kids,
Yep. Well,
but they do it.
yeah, particularly with their young children, right? I mean, by the time they get to be, 16, 17, and 18, they can probably dig that information out themselves,
Mhm.
right? But yeah, it's morally wrong. You're right to be discussing the details of that with your young children, right? But
Mhm.
what's really morally wrong is uh, the attorneys that are unnecessarily making the situation radically worse than it needs to be just to enrich themselves.
Mhm. Or they're in collusion with the judge, or, BFFs with the judge. They meet at
Right.
clubs, and I had a hairdresser, and he said, "I would see your judge and these attorneys talking. They're talking about cases. I don't know how anyone gets any justice out of these courthouses at all."
Right. Yeah, I mean it's a real and significant problem. I mean, um, the weird thing about family law is I think because there's so much discretion that's vested to judges that um, behaviors that in any other court system. So, like, I'm a personal injury attorney primarily. Um, those sorts of behaviors, if they were engaged in, you know, on the other side of the courthouse, right,
Mhm.
would be viewed as absolutely unethical, and everyone would be shocked that they happen. Same thing in criminal law, although in
Mhm.
criminal law it's a little bit more chummy as well, but the standards are so much higher that that the standards, the higher standards counteract the sort of chumminess that can happen in criminal law as well. But I mean, in family law, it's shocking. So let me give you an example of that. um I eventually wound up suing my ex-wife and her attorney for various tort claims. And if you don't know what a tort is, a tort's the area of law of private wrongs. So negligence is a tort, abuse of process is a tort, trespass to property, sexual harassment, those are all torts. So I sued my ex-wife for malicious prosecution because she filed false police reports against me to try and frame me for violating the restraining order she lied to get, which caused me to to go through the criminal process twice for crimes that I didn't commit. Then she went out and she made defamatory statements about me, said that I was an abuser, said that I was mentally ill, called me a narcissistic sociopath, sent flame emails to my colleagues, to my bankruptcy attorney, filed numerous bar complaints against me, with the bar association. So she, out there actively defaming me. Meanwhile, her attorney has, engaged in really abusive litigation tactics. She uses a writ of garnishment to steal $65,000 from me, using orders that have already been paid. So, I mean, I've got real tort claims against these people.
Mm-hmm.
So I sue them.
Mm-hmm.
I file a lawsuit against them, saying, sorry, when you file false police reports and get me criminally charged for stuff I didn't do, and it cost me $200,000, I get to sue you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, that case was dismissed by another judge, and that's one of the cases that I've got in the Court of Appeals that's going to make new law.
Mm-hmm.
But that judge, she dismisses the case. I find out literally a couple of days before I have to file my notice of appeal that the judge who's dismissed the tort case personally knows one of the defendants in the case. In 2013, Super Lawyers Magazine ran an article about her mother. The judge's mother is also an attorney. And the judge, one of the defendants, and her mother are all listed within one paragraph on the same page in this magazine article, right? So, and then I find all of these other connections between them. So there's really no question about
Mm-hmm.
whether or not my judge in the tort case knows, some of the defendants and has relationships with them within 3 degrees of separation, which is not allowed by the judicial rules, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she dismisses my lawsuit. Okay, that's just okay. We're just going to dismiss your lawsuit because it's abusive litigation. And so now we're going to fight that through the Court of Appeals as well. So it's the collusion that you talk about is absolutely real. It's I don't think, although there is the here's a bag of money, please rule the way I want you to type of corruption, I don't think that's that prevalent. What I think is far more prevalent is the people are able to speak in code to each other, and they're able to say, this case is just like the case with that crazy woman Maryann Petri, right? And it's exactly the same issue, and they're like, oh yeah, okay, right. So that everyone knows the way they're going to rule, right? And then they're able to scratch each other's backs, as well. Like, let me give you a more specific example. So I don't know in Pennsylvania if you have the family law commissioner program, but out here in King County, which is the largest county in Washington State, it's where Seattle is at, we have family law commissioners. Now, these are, they act like judges.
Mm-hmm.
They're basically judges. They wear the black robe. You address them as your honor. They write orders in family law cases. Well, there's nothing that prohibits them from also practicing law. So they can act as a judge one day and then turn around and practice law the next.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And all you got to do is if you know their phone number, you can pick up the phone and you can call these people and you can have a conversation with them, right? And there's no record of it. It's, there's no email, there's no letter, there's no physical record, of that. So yeah, I mean, I think it happens a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty disgusting.
It is.
I don't know what people are supposed to do, because when your back is up against the wall, I've had some pretty dark days and nights when I was going through my thing. Like, I don't know what to do with this child support judge at all. It was like she had a vendetta, I think, on everybody, but me too.
Right. I don't know that I necessarily, have a really solid answer as to what you're supposed to do, except for what I see happening, which I am encouraged by, is, the whole sort of shared parenting movement, that's starting to, move across the country. You get out there, you protest, you keep fighting, you testify, in front of legislatures, you do what you can to expose the problem. And the thing about this that I find really kind of interesting or puzzling at the same time is, this is a massive civil rights issue, just a massive civil rights issue. The idea that, you go into a courthouse, which is supposed to be about administering justice, and you come out of that courthouse with anything but justice, and the split is roughly 80-20, right? So 80% of um, parenting plans favor mothers and 20% favor fathers. If we had equality in this country, we would, in family courts, we would see that split would be somewhere roughly around 50-50.
Mhm.
But it's not, right?
Mhm.
you know and and it's not that fathers are always screwed over. It happens to mothers too, right? They just
Mhm.
happen to be the minority in that. But if in any sort of other demographic, if you looked at it and you said, well, 80% of the people are getting mistreated, we would go, well, that's evidence of your favorite ism: racism, sexism, homophobism, polka dot personism. Doesn't really matter what is. We would say that is evidence of a discriminatory practice and procedure. And that is the exact argument that was made before the Supreme Courts in Brown versus the Board of Education, right? When we were arguing and saying separate but equal is not separate but equal, it's separate and unequal, right? We're making those exact same arguments, that you look at the numbers of how they're split down, and that it's unfair and it's unequal. So I think that the answer to what you do about that is that you fight against that system, and you rip the Band-Aid off, and you say, no, there's a very serious problem happening inside of our family courts, which then leads you to the sort of the logical question of why is that, and what
Mhm.
do you do about it?
Well, I just think they should be abolished. We should get rid of them. We should get rid of CPS. We have to do something about these false allegations. People should not be calling out a false allegation, calling someone mentally ill, or calling out parental alienation in a courtroom. I think if they make false allegations, they should go through criminal court and prove it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you to a certain extent. um, I think that one of the things that, so first of all, I think that if you start with a 50-50 presumption, you eliminate a lot of the incentivizing.
Mhm.
And there are states, surprisingly, most of them are in the South right now, that have passed 50-50 presumptions, and they see, they've just a few short years, they see dramatic decreases in high conflict divorces, in false allegations of domestic violence, in incidents of actual domestic violence.
Mhm.
They see lowered rates of actual domestic violence. They see uh, increased responsiveness, amongst the children who were involved. Just benefits that just cut all the way across the board. Partially because everybody knows, getting away from 50-50 is going to be very tough.
Mhm.
And unless you've got really strong bulletproof evidence, you're not going to get away from 50-50. You're going to go through the family court system, and that's going to be the parenting plan that comes out of it. And, there are just, these benefits that just, to the benefits to the legal system, not even talking about the benefits on the social science side, but,
Mhm.
and to narrow in on one little bit of that. So the people on the opposite side of the shared parenting movement, the people who are, often called the domestic violence industry and advocates, their argument often is that we can't do shared parenting because the end result of that is that it's going to create increased victimization in domestic violence. Well, the states that have passed that have found that that's actually not true. That actual domestic violence rates have gone down, and probably partially because one of the issues that are probably driving people to fight with each other that then creates violence is about who is going to have access to the children after divorce. And there's a Dutch study that was done about 10 years or so ago that showed that even when you force people who don't want to work with each other and to share their children, that there are positive results all the way across everywhere. There's 1 year out, 5 years out, because there's nothing to fight about.
Mhm.
Right? There really isn't anything to fight about. So, and then I think the second piece of your puzzle is that, the rules of evidence they exist so that you can prove certain things happened. And while on one hand, we vested judges with a lot of discretion in family law because we wanted them to be able to make decisions in the best interest of the children easily and cheaply, and to rely upon what they knew to be sort of the right solution. The other side of that is that they bring in all sorts of stuff that would never pass muster in evidence in any other courtroom, and it's on this lowest standard of evidence possible, the preponderance of the evidence standard, which is thought of as 51%, right?
Mhm.
So, and they're allowed to consider hearsay evidence. they're allowed to just just say, oh well, this person said this. People lie their way through court.
Mhm.
And they're like, oh, we'll just consider that. And the lying is a huge problem. I mean, they call it
Mhm.
the liar's court for a reason. I mean,
Mhm.
you can even have the evidence that just clearly proves that the other person is lying, and the judge will be just like, whatever, I don't care. I
Mhm.
mean, I've never seen, and I make a point now of asking other family law attorneys that I speak with about this question. I said, neither me nor any other divorce attorney or attorney that I know of has ever seen anybody ever prosecuted for perjury.
Mhm.
Not at all.
Mm-mm.
Not at all. So, it's a ridiculous free-for-all,
Mhm.
right? Where there are no rules, and everything that you think should be the rules just oh yeah, we don't do that here. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? You don't do that here.
Mhm.
I mean,
Mhm.
you go through the evidentiary admission process, and like, they don't do that here. I mean, I was in a hearing and I was objecting because the opposing party was testifying with hearsay. As a matter of fact, she was testifying with a hearsay within hearsay. She was saying, somebody told me that somebody else said this thing. And I'm like, that's hearsay. It's hearsay within hearsay.
Mhm.
Objection. The commissioner literally says to me, oh, we're allowed to consider hearsay in this hearing. And I'm like, yeah, you might be allowed to hear it, but I'm still allowed to make an objection about it.
Mhm.
It's ridiculous. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous.
And there's no judicial accountability when,
Yep.
they're giving a parent visitation times, and
Yep.
the opposition party will take that child somewhere else. The lights are on, you go to pick up the kids, the lights are on, no one's home.
Yep.
So then your lawyer files an emergency petition because they're not cooperating.
Yep.
So therefore they're in contempt, but the judge just gives them a slap on the wrist and just says, whatever. And it still continues.
Yeah. We don't have a civil enforcement arm in law enforcement like some
Mhm.
other countries do. So, some other countries, that sort of, um, that sort of civil problem, you literally call the police, and the police will send a civil enforcement officer to investigate the situation, and they've got some limited power to be able to help resolve the situation, but they'll actually, if they're not, they'll actually issue a report.
Mhm.
But we don't, we just, you call the cops here, you're like, hey, this is a court ordered, visitation that I've got,
Mhm.
and this person is ignoring it, and the cops are like, yeah, that's a civil problem, you got to go back through family court for that. I'm like, there's no way to enforce it, even though, I mean, if we could enforce it,
Mhm.
because interference with visitation is a crime.
Mhm.
But good luck getting a police department to write that report, or getting a prosecutor's office to file those charges, unless someone kidnaps the kid and disappears.
Mhm. Now, the state police would always say they would make a call to the DA on call, who would say, "Oh, we can't get involved because they're already in court. They're already fighting in family court." So that was the excuse that the state police couldn't go where they should go and enforce. And
Yeah,
this should be happening. You're standing there with the court order. I don't care if we're fighting in family court. This is the order.
right. Right. I mean, the incident in Texas where the father was shot and killed on the steps of his ex-wife's home by the boyfriend. He
Mhm,
was, I forget his name. I think it might be Kyle. It's pretty easy to find. And because there's video of it.
mhm,
His wife or girlfriend at the time was, literally filming it. And so you see this poor man get shot in the chest with a shotgun. And just before he gets killed, he's literally there basically screaming and saying, "I've got a court order. Where is my son?"
mhm,
And the guy who, kills him, the murderer, um, who's now the stepfather of the kids, right?
mhm,
Is, basically saying to him, "Your court order doesn't mean squat here." I'm like, what?
mhm,
Yeah. I
mhm,
mean, a constitutional right doesn't mean anything. A
mm-mm.
court order doesn't mean anything if you can't get them enforced. I
Right.
mean, in my case, we've got a parenting plan that's been in place since June of 2018. Never mind the fact that opposing counsel forged part of the court orders, that she forged a section of the findings of fact, that she forged keywords inside of the parenting plan, and she, kept all that information from the judge. Just setting all that aside, the fact of the matter is there's a court order in place in my case from June of 2018 that says Sean gets to see his son every other weekend. These are the parameters, right? This is the contact he gets to have. My ex-wife has completely ignored that.
Mm.
Since then, I haven't seen my son in 2.5 years, and it's been an uphill battle to try and get anywhere, even to get the court to even just slightly pay attention to it. I mean, I just recently got, a microscopic amount of progress on the issue, but there's no guarantee that I'm going to see my son, within the next year. And
This is
there's
terrible.
no enforcement. No
Uh,
enforcement.
I just these judges have got to be held accountable. Their immunity must end, because if they're not gonna hold anyone accountable, I recently heard of a judge saying, "I don't follow the Constitution. I don't have to follow the Constitution."
I really
So yeah, oh, she said it, yeah. Um, and I don't know, I think they've got to be overhauled, get rid of family court
Well, I
altogether.
think that I think an answer to that would be, and I know people aren't going to necessarily like hearing this, is, and this is part of what I tried to do in suing my ex-wife, is, to allow civil litigation to hold these people responsible.
Mhm,
And, um, so in the scenario you're delineating about the judges, I don't know exactly how we would go about doing it, but it'd be great if you could, file a civil claim against the state when a judge is, not obeying the law. Um, not exactly sure how we would do that, but before you get even to that point, the ability to use tort law to protect yourself, against these sorts of situations, it is something that, we should allow people to do. So, for instance, let me analyze your situation in that scenario. From what I
mhm.
understand, was it your ex-husband or his significant other who filed the allegations that you were emotionally abusing your daughters, right?
Uh, I they're telling me it was the psychologist,
The psychologist who did that. Okay. Well, that
apparently.
doesn't really make a lot of sense, because from what I understand is that they filed a series of
Mhm,
of CPS complaints against you, one right after another,
mhm,
right? So that
mhm,
wouldn't make a lot of sense. Okay, so in your scenario, I mean, wouldn't it be great if you could go ahead and get a hold of those records and you find out who it is that made those allegations against you and you could sue them for defamation?
Mhm.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, I tried.
Right? I mean, wouldn't that be great that you could, bring some accountability to them, in that scenario?
Mhm.
You accused me of, emotionally abusing my children, right? CPS investigated and found it was unfounded. Here's your lawsuit.
Mhm. Mhm.
People might think seriously about whether or not they're going to make false allegations against other people.
Right. I agree. I even tried to find out who exactly did. I think I found out who did the second allegation or indication, but, it's unclear about the first one. However, I did try to sue all of them, including the ex, in federal court. That, as you can probably find online, it went to the appellate court. Essentially, the federal court judge just didn't read the exhibits, which is the evidence. He even admitted that he didn't read it. So I had to file a motion for you to read the exhibits and do your damn job. And so he did that in 5 minutes. And then ruled that he wanted to close the case. So I had to take that to the appellate court. And you wait months and months to find out they're just going to close the case.
Yeah. And it's a game of, we don't want to have this exposed. And
Mhm.
that's basically exactly the same thing they did with me. I mean, I'm a little bit different, right? Because I'm an attorney and I understand, torts in a way that most people don't. And I was like, what these people are doing are clear tort actions, and here's the law, and screw it. I mean, I can't, I didn't want to sue my ex-wife. I didn't want to sue my, her unethical attorney. I just wanted to move on with my life. But at some point I'm like, I gotta get these crazy people to stop filing false police reports against me and
Mhm.
to, stop doing these things, and if the family court isn't going to step in and do it, right? Well, then, okay, let's see how much they like, hearing this story played in front of a jury.
Mhm.
um, you know, um, and that was squashed under these
Mhm.
new abusive litigation laws. And you know, it seems to me that when you're looking for accountability, when you're looking for justice, you know, part of what the family court is supposed to be doing is taking this very narrow view and saying, we're going to help this family figure out what changes need to happen inside of its family system in the best interest of the children. That's what they're supposed to be doing. And if they did that, and they did that job effectively, we wouldn't have a lot of these issues about accountability, right? About, how do you hold these other people accountable? Because the family court would be saying, no, 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 no. You're not allowed to, file, complaints against Maryann saying that she's abusing her kid unless you've got hard evidence. And if you do that,
Mhm.
and the complaints come back as unfounded, right? There's
Mhm.
going to be consequences to you.
Mhm.
Um, if they did that, then we wouldn't have a lot of the chaos that we have. But they're not interested in doing that, partially
Mm-mm.
because it's a $60 billion a year industry, and everybody is getting rich.
Exactly. Even though I was exonerated, the judge should have just put us back to 50-50, which we had been for 10 years. I mean, come on.
Right,
But
right,
he continued this charade that I was mentally ill and emotionally abusive. It was just a nightmare.
right. Let's talk about the emotion, about the mentally ill thing for just a minute here. I'm really glad you brought that up, because we see that a lot, right?
Mhm.
And it is sort of the silver bullet used against women. It's also used against men as well, but I think it is far more aimed at women than it is aimed at men. But so let's just explore that for a minute here,
Mhm.
okay? There's this idea that if you have a mental health issue, right? Again, in a land of magical thinking, that somehow you can't be an effective parent.
Mhm.
Right? You know, most of us, newsflash everybody, most of us actually do have a mental health issue.
Mhm.
right? Going through life is difficult,
Mhm.
right? We're all grappling with depression to one degree or another. All of us have, personality traits that, can develop into, a much more serious mental health issue at times. All of our mental health fluctuates, goes up and goes down, right? Everybody on the planet has to deal with that, right?
Mhm.
The idea that even if you do have some sort of a mental health issue, that suddenly you can't be a parent, or that you're going to have your parenting controlled, right, because of that. It's just, it's fallacious on its face. If it were true, we would see just this massive epidemic of, clearly crazy people out of control.
Mhm.
It's it and what's so wrong with a child growing up and seeing their parent as a human being,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
What is so wrong with that? I mean, it, it's not that every person who is dealing with a mental health issue is therefore necessarily violent towards their children,
Mhm.
right? What's wrong with the children growing up and getting to know their parent, even if they do have a mental health issue, and understanding them as a human being? I believe that my ex-wife has an undiagnosed mental health issue. There is some support for the idea that she has an undiagnosed mental health issue. I think she should address that mental health issue. do
Mhm.
do I think that means that she shouldn't be allowed to be the mother to our child? No, that'd be preposterous.
Mhm.
Right?
Mhm.
If she has a mental health issue, and if she should deal with it. It's just like, if she were missing a leg, she'd need to deal with that too.
Mhm.
Right?
Right.
And it's really discriminatory. And
Mhm.
if we could ever get a federal court to actually take a look at it, it probably violates some version of the ADA.
Mhm.
It, it's nuts.
Mhm. Mhm.
Not to use too much of a pun when talking about a mental health issue and calling it nuts.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, I mean, all you have to do is say, I see a counselor, as I had been seeing a counselor, like, for years, due to job stress working as a nurse in the ER, you're seeing things you probably shouldn't see, you know, traumatic things. Also dealing with and trying to co-parent with someone who should see a counselor. So, you're seeing a counselor to help you deal with someone who needs to see a counselor, like a
Yeah,
real one.
yeah, and you see this across places. My mother was a nurse. She was a geriatric nurse, and
Mm,
she went back to nursing school when I was in junior high. And so, I mean, I know some of those stories about, you know what nurses deal with. And what nurses deal with is, commensurate to what lots of other people in other jobs, have to deal with as well, where their jobs are mentally demanding and
mhm,
taxing and take something out of them. And they need to be, treating their mental health as seriously as they treat their physical health. And
mhm,
the idea that and the people who do that, that um that that do exactly what we want them to do, treat their mental health seriously, they often just get re-victimized in family court.
mhm,
um because I'm networking and I'm building this, I'm building my website on ethicalkarma.com. uh, I'm, connecting with lots of other people, and one of the people that I'm connecting with, uh, he's an Army colonel, and him and I have had, long, in-depth conversations about how this mental health issue and mental health being used against you in the family court system is particularly insidious for veterans.
mhm, mhm,
So veterans come back from the wars, and the Veterans Administration says to them, you got PTSD, right? We're going to help you. Take that seriously, right? We're going to get you the help that you need. And then, their marriages come apart, and their PTSD diagnosis is because they went and fought in our damn wars,
Mhm.
right, are used against them to take their kids against them.
Mhm.
And then we all stand around and wring our hands, and act like we're all surprised when we have an epidemic of veterans that are killing themselves
Mhm.
because they don't have access to their children. It's preposterous to say that simply because somebody has a mental health issue that we need to restrict their parenting about that. What's far better to do would be to say, well, what is their mental health issue, and does it actually pose a real danger to their child? And if it doesn't, then we need to, respectfully shut the fuck up about it.
Mhm. Mhm. Exactly. Thank you for saying that. I
Yeah.
mean because even though a parent may have, like, I had a pristine psychological evaluation by an independent contractor, the ex still wouldn't get one. He would not get his psych eval. So the judge actually yelled at him. I was actually shocked. He actually got yelled at. But anyway, he still didn't get it. Then the judge had to order him again. So he had been seeing a CPS counselor for on and off for, I don't know, couple, maybe a year. So this is the guy that did his psych eval. So of course it came out with rainbows, unicorns, and it was just came out wonderful when he should have went and paid the 400 and some dollars like I had to and get an independent contractor in to diagnose him.
Yeah. I had a similar thing happen to me. I mean, the corrupt GAL in our case um, ordered me to go get a psychological evaluation, but didn't order my ex-wife to go get a psychological evaluation. So I go off, I get the psychological evaluation. The shrink comes back and says, effectively, Sean's extraordinarily honest. He may have ADHD, big surprise. He's intelligent. He's flirtatious and can be a little bit inappropriate, right? I'm like, you know, really? I needed to pay $5,000 for you to tell me that I like to flirt and I've got an inappropriate sense of humor. All right. Oh, and then the shrink also says, oh, and by the way, his ex-wife, right? She's got a clear functioning issue. And I mean, it's about as close as a shrink can get to saying, the ex-wife needs to probably get a psychological
Mhm.
evaluation as well. Do you think that the GAL ordered her to go get one? No.
Mm.
No, because of course they don't want to dig down into that, right? They don't want to be like, well, maybe there actually is, someone who has a mental health issue here, and maybe that person actually isn't Sean. Maybe that person is, his
Mhm.
ex-wife or soon to be ex-wife, right? No, they didn't. They didn't want to dig down into that because that would have exposed that would have probably very quickly resolved the conflict,
Mhm.
taken it out of family court, right? We would have pivoted as a family to addressing whatever those issues were, right? And stop the gladiatorial blood sport between my ex-wife and me, right? And these people would have stopped making money.
Right. Ugh.
Yeah, it's at each and every step along the way, what you see is the unethical lawyers and many of the vulture professionals
Mhm.
doing and saying things and laying the groundwork to create more conflict, because by creating more conflict they create hourly fee billing, and by doing that then they're able to drain the family of all of its money.
Mhm. Oh, definitely. That's why I had to go pro se. It was enough's enough.
Right,
Swiping the card, I can't do it anymore.
right. And I'll bet, Maryann, you know and I don't know you very well yet, but I can tell you're a decent human being. I'll bet that your ex-husband was also a decent human being at one point, and that going through this process, you know, made whatever issues your ex-husband are dealing with worse, and polarized the two of you in a way that was completely unnecessary.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, plus me setting him up on a date with a woman that I didn't really, I don't know, like I always say on every interview, I don't know if if I knew she worked in the courthouse or I did, but I set them up on a date and she came after me with an axe.
An axe.
Well, see, the thing is she couldn't have kids of her own, so she stole mine.
Oh, yeah,
Eh, yeah.
yeah. And the system rewarded that, didn't it?
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
It really did. Um, it got to the point where I won't keep you too much longer because I could just talk your ear off, but she had said, "I know a lot of people in the courthouse, and I'm friends with all the judges." And she had said that on 2 occasions, and really, I didn't know what to do with that
Oh yeah.
until, you know, I talked to the DA about it, and he said, "Well, her boss, did you tell her boss this?" I said, "No, I don't know what to do with it." He says, "Okay, write him a letter. His name is this, and mail him a letter and tell him what she had said." Because she also threatened me with the state police. She said she knew all the state policemen in the barracks, which was just right around the corner. So once I did that, I don't know what happened, but apparently she got in some type of trouble because when I had my sons that weekend, because now I'm a non-custodial parent paying him child support, but my middle son was crying that they could lose the house if she loses her job.
Yeah. Similar things happen in my case, where my son was saying things that could only have happened because he was hearing things that his mother was telling him. And in a couple of instances, I literally have recordings of my ex-wife saying things to our son that are completely inappropriate, where she's
Mhm,
discussing what's going on in the court case. And like, my son was 10 at the time.
mm,
It's preposterous. So, but again, it's fueled by these unethical attorneys. I mean, which is
mhm,
part of the reason why I came out of this process, and I was like, well, you know how do you hold these unethical attorneys responsible? I mean, what is the answer to that? And I had to learn the hard way how to file an effective bar complaint against opposing counsel. And by effective, it doesn't mean that she gets disciplined, although I believe that counsel probably is going to get disciplined now that there's a court order that finds that she has made false statements to the court and that she engages in litigation to harass. But how do you file a bar complaint that the bar association will actually investigate and take seriously?
mhm,
um, and I kind of knew how to do that because it's a fundamental of legal writing. But most people who get forced into the pro se self-represented position don't know how to do that. So that's why I wound up creating the website on ethicalkarma.com to teach people how do you research unethical opposing counsel, how do you figure out what their playbook is, and
mhm.
how do you ultimately write a bar complaint that will cause the bar association to actually investigate them. Because you know i i I look at what these divorce lawyers do. As a personal injury lawyer, I know that these things are unethical,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
Like, I'll just ask you right now, your ex-husband's attorney, how many times are you aware of that they lied, either in a hearing or in written documents? How
Numerous
many?
times. Oh,
All the
I
time.
can't count. All the time.
And I bet you that there are plenty of situations that you can actually prove that they lied,
Mhm,
right? Because you've got a document. The attorney said A, B, and C. You've got a document that says X, Y, and Z, and they had that document before they even showed up and said A, B, and C,
mhm,
right? You
mhm.
probably have those facts, because almost everybody that I talk to involved in the disaster of family court can do that. Well, you know that's unethical.
Mhm. Yeah.
Here's the ethical rules. They're right
Mhm.
here. All
Mhm.
right. Rules of professional conduct. Right. That violates RPC 3.3. Counsel should not be doing that. right? And why do they do that? Why do they do that and just get away with it all the time? Because they know they're going to.
Mm-hmm.
If you did that in personal injury law, if when I'm representing somebody who got, some cyclist who got run over by a car, and I lie, I make something up, all right,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that it's a lie. Well, first of all, opposing counsel who probably works for an insurance company, all right, is going to jump all over that, right, and is going to, be putting the fact that I lied up in front of, our judge, and our judge is going to spank me, right? Then on
Mm-hmm.
top of that, opposing counsel is going to put the word out to insurance defense attorneys, right, that I'm untrustworthy and that I will lie, that
Mm-hmm.
I'm unethical and I will lie. All right. So,
Mm-hmm.
every insurance company will know, and every insurance defense counsel will know that about me. And, my practice will become infinitely harder, and it would
Mm-hmm.
become much more difficult for me to deliver positive results for my client. But in family law, they just get away with it like crazy. It's like the ethical rules say an attorney shall not lie except family law attorneys,
Right.
right?
Right.
So, I mean, and bar associations just, they often just sweep this under the carpet. In
Mm-hmm.
opposing counsel's case, she's got a 15-year history of people filing bar complaints against her, of, repeatedly complaining to her boss about her behavior. Well, her boss's behavior is not much better,
Mm-hmm.
right? But a 15-year history of doing this, and the bar association hasn't done anything about it, right? And they
Mm-hmm.
haven't done anything about it, at least in part, is because they haven't had bar complaints that are, well written, where, the person is able to come forward and say, well, here's the ethical rule that they violated. Here's the piece of evidence that proves that they violated the ethical rule, right? Hold them responsible.
Mm-hmm.
My argument is that if we had, if, say, over the next 10 years or so, if, bar associations across the country were inundated by well-written, bar complaints against unethical divorce attorneys, and they had to increase their staffing in order to deal with those issues, that would have a noticeable effect on, these, bad apple attorneys that are driving a lot of these conflicts.
Mm-hmm.
I'll bet you that if you were able to research, your opposing counsel, that you would find at least a couple of bar complaints against him. But,
Mm-hmm.
if you went off and just did the research and say, like read the dockets of every case that he'd been involved in, over the previous 10 years, you would find, lots of documents where, other opposing parties and other opposing attorneys, had complained about his behavior. That's my
Mm-hmm.
guess. I don't know
Exactly.
that, I don't know, but that's my
You're right.
guess.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, he only gets a 1 star on his Yelp. So uh, there's a complaint on there, and I've heard other verbal complaints, and oh,
Yeah, I mean, the dishonesty amongst, unethical divorce attorneys is a massive problem, and it's not being looked at, and it's not being addressed, and
mm-hmm.
it should be. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you see that on both, and the wild thing about this too is that both on the domestic violence industry side and on the shared parenting side, that advocates on both sides often will say, it's really the divorce attorneys that are driving all of these problems.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yet nothing happens.
No, not at all. Um, yeah, it's got to stop. Um, even when you catch them in a lie in the courtroom, so and so, attorney so and so misspoke. Why can't I come out and say attorney so and so blatantly lied to your face, Your Honor?
Right. Right. I mean, yeah, that's exactly what it should be. Right. I mean,
Yeah.
but do they don't, it's, even I'll tell you, I'm going to share a screen with you here.
Okay.
All right. So I'm gonna show you something which is going to blow your mind. All right. So even sometimes when you have, absolute evidence that, what counsel is doing is, completely inappropriate, they don't do anything about it. So you have to turn on screen sharing for me.
Okay. Mhm. Okay. Share screen.
Got it?
I hit it. Is it doing it?
Still says disabled screen sharing. Go for it again.
Oh, why is it not doing that? Share computer sound. Huh. Man.
Maybe you can't do it.
Yeah, I don't know if I can. I don't know if it'll let me.
Okay. So
Mm.
I've literally got a photograph of opposing counsel in the courtroom. And this photograph has now, it's basically everywhere because it's so outrageous and it's completely inappropriate. I just pumped it out of my printer. So I'm just gonna hold it up for you here. This is opposing counsel in the courtroom. Literally.
Oh.
She's flipping me off in the courtroom. Literally. She's holding up a yellow pad like this.
Mm-hmm.
Holding up a yellow pad like this in the courtroom before the judge walks in to the courtroom. Well, I gave that to the Bar Association. That is completely unethical. Completely unethical. All right.
Oh my gosh.
I gave that to the Bar Association. I put that in front of our judge, right? I'm saying, this is the level of behavior that I'm seeing from opposing counsel, completely ignored. I mean, if that's not evidence of that there's a real serious problem, I don't know what is.
Exactly. Apparently it's never unethical enough. When you get the letter back, it's like, well, it's still not considered unethical behavior. I'm like, okay.
Right. I know. Sometimes I've been like, well, what do they got to do? I mean,
You're right.
What at what point do they say, this behavior is, not appropriate? I don't understand. I really don't understand. So yeah, so that's me. That's where I'm at. That's where my story. I mean, I've had a little bit of progress in my case. Our judge, who I believe was incompetent, recused herself for bias last week.
Good.
Which is a major. It's a huge deal, which I don't think opposing counsel was expecting at all, because she'd really been depending upon the fact that we had an incompetent, brand new family law judge, and that she would just basically rubber stamp anything that she would put in front of her. So hopefully what'll happen is that, my case will wind up in front of an experienced family law judge, and that, hopefully some of these mistakes can start to be corrected, and hopefully I'll be able to see my son, 2.5 years is outrageous. So,
It is. I'm so sorry you're going through this. And, I'd like to have you on as a guest again, if you'd like to come back on.
sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, that'd be great. So,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Is there anything else you'd like to add, or any advice for anyone?
Yeah, I actually do. So, I've got a website, unethicalkarma.com. You can go there. I've got some pages on how to teach people on they can research their opposing counsel, how to research the background of their judge, how to access all of the state's ethical bar, or all of the state's ethical rules. So you can download them. You can learn them just as well as a lawyer can, and then how to write bar complaints that get action. Again, the measure of that is whether the bar association will conduct an investigation, not whether ultimately they get disciplined, but just an effective bar complaint that a bar association will take seriously. And this year I'm going to be a contributing author in a book that's coming out called The War on Dads. And I would encourage people that they should get out and they should try and get their voice heard. I mean, I try and tell people that there's a lot of things that anyone can do. You may or may not be able to launch a podcast or write a book or whatever. But you can get out with your cardboard sign and you can protest on Parental Alienation Day. This year I'll be standing in front of the King County Superior Court with a 9-foot tall inflatable Santa holding a sign that says parental alienation is child abuse.
It sure is. Excellent.
Right? I'll be there at 9 a.m. So if you happen to be in Seattle, come on down.
Oh, I wish I was there.
Bring your inflatable Easter bunny, right? But literally, even if it's as innocuous as that, even if it is just a matter of taking a few hours off from work, about talking to your legislatures, about talking to your elected representatives about shared parenting. Shared parenting is an issue that cuts across all demographics. Doesn't matter if you're liberal, conservative, white, black, green, polka dot, doesn't matter. We're all parents, and they all care about these things, and you want to get people passionately charged up about something really quickly. Start talking about shared parenting, and you will find an enormous amount of people who agree with you. So there's lots of things that one can do, and the only way this is going to change is to get out there and have your voice be heard and put the pressure on it. So
and that's why I'm here.
Right. Instead of helping people as a nurse. This isn't what you wanted to do. Right.
It's amazing.
This isn't what I wanted to do. I was living a pretty quiet life, happy to live that quiet life, and and now here I am.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully things get better.
I have a little bit of hope that they will get better. So, I hope they get better for you too.
Well, thank you.
So.
Well, I definitely will have you back on. So, don't jump off.
Okay.
Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms that in turn perpetuate parental alienation. I am your host, Maryann Petri, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Please join us again here in the future with Attorney Sean and other exciting guests. Thank you so much, Attorney Kuhlmeyer. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.